And I just want to say hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever this gets presented. As Josh just said, we are the Wunderman Thompson Global Inclusive Experience Practice. Today, together with our team in Taiwan, what we want to do is take you through and share a bit more about what we do, what the practice is built on, and we'll take you through an overview. And then what we'll do is share with you some things that are happening today, some things that we're seeing coming ahead of us, and kind of our thoughts on your industry and what you're doing locally. So we're excited to be here. And just before we get started, do a little introduction of ourselves. Happy to spend the next half hour, 40 minutes with you. My name is Cindy Shao. I partner with Josh Loebner to lead our inclusive design practice. I'm based in New York, and my background is in strategy and innovation. What else can I tell you? I think that's where we hit it off. Josh?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Cindy. So I'm Dr. Josh Loebner. I have a background of 20 years in advertising, also focusing in the academic world on disability, diversity, and equity when it comes to building a larger ramp into advertising, marketing, and branding. It's been an exciting time to be global head of inclusive design at Wunderman Thompson and leading the inclusive experience practice. And so thrilled to be able to share more narratives with you. And one more thing about my narrative, I have a lived experience of being disabled. And for me, that's means I'm fully blind in my left eye, legally blind in my right. And we'll talk a little bit more about what disability means at the onset here. So just sharing a little bit more about defining disability, I defined a little bit about my disability, but we tend to, in certain instances, look at disability from an individual's perspective, seeing that a person may be blind or a person may be deaf, and that those considerations are focused solely on them. But the opportunity really is, as we move forward, we're finding that it doesn't just frame an individual's perspective and their outlook and their either challenges or opportunities, but how those are connected better to or the barriers that are in place from society, whether it's a lack of physical access or a lack of digital access, or ways that we can bridge some of those gaps to be able to be more equitable in everything that society has to offer for these individuals. And we're also seeing a reframing of disability from a pride perspective. Here we see a young lady, Tiffany Yu, who leads the Diversibility nonprofit, and her t-shirt says, or her shirt says, disability is not a bad word. So people now are actually embracing disability in a more positive light. And just a little bit more about reinterpreting what disability means. Disability is growing and expanding in what we consider as being disabled. In the past, we've looked at primarily physical disabilities, ones that are easily apparent, seeing a wheelchair user or somebody who may be using sign language because they're deaf or hard of hearing, or somebody who's blind that uses a white cane. But now, this is an example of Richard Branson, who probably shares that he's dyslexic, and he and others have partnered with LinkedIn to be able to use dyslexia as a business skill that they can check within their LinkedIn profile. So disability now is expanding to include everything from neurodiversities such as dyslexia, autism, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and others that brands and ourselves as staff and team members and parents and in our personal life can better recognize that are more and more part of our world.
And just to frame this up, I pulled this from the recent article that was in Forbes in October, and the World Health Organization has an estimate that 15% of the global population have disabilities, the world's largest minority. And we do believe that this number is a lot larger, and we'll share that with you. And of course, always question the data, because we are seeing different numbers from different sources. And I think the main thing here is This is only numbers that include those who self-identify and who are self-selecting as disabled. There are people who are not opting into that and not identifying. There are people who are not counted as part of the statistics. And so just keep that in mind, because the other thing is it's the largest minority population where anyone can be part of it. And so that is important. And then the last part here highlights, when it comes to telling our stories, we've either been reduced to harmful stereotypes or left out of the conversation entirely. And I think that I really wanted to pull that in just to highlight why we're doing this and why we're in the practice and how we do it. So let's just get started with what is inclusive design. And when you see the bell curve here, the approach and the practice and the belief is founded on really when you're trying to solve a need from a user standpoint, if you solve it from an edge case, so like in the bell curve, if we're looking at the most extreme case of a user that has the least amount of access, and we're able to solve that with a solution with in a way that we're able to address the need, that we're actually solving for everyone. And really, we're looking to do that through our practice, through the experiences, and through just thinking about how we approach inclusive design. And as part of that, the language can change and we're seeing it evolve. Josh and I were just at a UN event last week where we met a gentleman from, he's from China. He's here studying in the US, and he was studying about accessibilities. And he started explaining to me how inclusive design, even in the language that's being used today, when you think about the translation Chinese 无障碍, that some of those words don't quite translate into inclusion and accessibility, and even that is getting reframed. And so what we want to do is take a step back, because we know the language will change, but in terms of the values and the principles, that those things are clear, so we can give space to the language changing, but kind of based on what we believe in, the core principles are all still the same. And so usually you'll see 3, but our last one we feel is the most critical. So as we go through, you'll see why. The first is really recognize exclusion. We all have our own biases when we solve problems. I just jumped into one yesterday when I was doing qual research, where I made some assumptions and then had to come back and apologize. And part of that is really have the understanding that when inclusion is really thinking about the widest set of capabilities on how someone might be using a product, an offering, or a service. And, if we recognize our own biases, we can sort of catch that on the second. The second of the core principle is really knowing when and how to learn from diversity. And so if I know I don't know and what I don't know, and I can acknowledge that, I can make sure what in terms of trying to fill the gaps of putting underrepresented user at the center of the project and making sure that I'm not speaking for someone, but I'm elevating voices and making sure there's a platform and a safe space for us to be able to discuss, learn from, and understand how we can bring that into the conversation when we're trying to solve for a problem and co-solve for a solution, right? And then the third principle here, it's really solve for one, extend to all. That's like the bell curve that I showed earlier, where when we're able to solve that edge case, the example that Jill gives with the ramp, where the ramp of a sidewalk, that slope, if you're able to put that in, someone who may have mobility impairment can go up that ramp with a wheelchair, but so can a mom with a stroller who is trying to move around and navigate in an urban environment, for example. And so here we have also the self-driving car. The Tesla is a really good example in terms of being able to have that enable someone who may have mobility issues, or someone like me who does not drive, to enable that that sort of mobility. And then the last one, would you like to cover that, Josh? Nothing without us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. Nothing without us. And that's a reframing of a phrase, nothing about us without us, that basically means we want to be able to recognize disability inclusion, or just diversity, equity, and inclusion from a representation standpoint. But now that phrase in and of itself is simplified to nothing about us, or rather nothing without us. And what that means is that we want to make sure that we're a part of the entire process of anything that we do, in particular within Wunderman Thompson offices. How can we make sure that in a process of creative development, in a process of research and marketing intelligence or strategic planning, that we incorporate these marginalized groups in that process? We listen from them, we learn from them, we let them be our guide as experts in who they are and how they live in their disabilities or non-disabled, but they're still marginalized, in ways that they can be able to help be a torchbearer for understanding who they are and how to interpret that within campaigns and creative executions.
And so at Wunderman Thompson, in defining our inclusive design practice, these are the 4 principles that we live by, not in just what we believe, but also how we navigate and how we approach our work together and how we go to market. And so we, in just even what informs the work, we do have a lot of intelligence at our fingertips in terms of proprietary trends that we sort of have either publicly available or that we have access to. And so whether it's audience, understanding what's coming ahead, trends in diversity, inclusion, equity, and understanding sort of what is happening in the world today when it comes to inclusion. We also have been very bold in terms of setting new industry standards. And so not sure if you've seen, but we can definitely share later in this presentation. We've been working very closely with thought leaders like you, our client partners in the marketplace, to make sure that whatever industry we touch, whatever category we touch, whatever brands we touch, that we start really with an inclusive audience in mind, and that we're able to really work through some sort of real world challenges and problems together, so that we're able to not only impact the communities and the audience first and foremost, but we're trying to also elevate the conversation within the industry, as well as from a creative standpoint, do award-winning work. And so here, we're just sharing a snippet of some of the recognition that has been sort of shared and publicized through our colleagues and also our partners and our colleagues and our founder of the practice who had led this work. And it continues to move forward in current work, that this is not just a one-time thing, but we're partnering with those thought leaders first and foremost at the helm, and then we are bringing more people in as part of trying to really raise the visibility as well as scale the impact of what we can do with inclusive design. And so, our world is changing, as we all know, from the last 2 years, and continues to shift and move forward. And one of the things that we see, and I know that in Taiwan, it's going to be a little bit of a different dynamic, but you're going through your own changes. But what we do see globally, and what we see very acutely in the US, is that globally we are living in a increasingly more diverse, multicultural, multi-generational world today, and it's just going to become ever more so moving forward. What we want to do is really actually pull shared values across generations. I don't think there's a need to sit here and divide sort of the differences in how we feel, but in terms of collectively, what we see in the world is that most people feel actively engaged. So we see that 83% of millennials are probably 30 to 45. Today in the world, and that this generation actively believe that organizations should foster inclusive culture, and then the younger ones, so it's actually the under 25s. So those millennials might be older, but 76% of Gen Zers say they feel diversity and inclusion is an important topic. So what we're seeing across the board is most consumers And most audiences care when brands and organizations care about inclusivity and that they're addressing it as an important topic, and that they're not just showing it up in their company values, but they're showing up in ways that they can understand, actions they can see and feel and experience, and how they interact with those brands and companies every day.
And just to share a little bit more about how we frame and what we see as inclusive design and who that connects with, we have shared a lot about disability. I think one of the challenges, though, is when we look at disability from a marginalized perspective, we tend to lean towards accessibility as the only metric of engaging individuals with disabilities. We could say, yes, our website's accessible. We're done with our communications and welcoming that disability community. But what I would push back and say is, yes, accessibility is a human right. Accessibility is needed. But when we think of individuals and groups with disabilities, we should consider them from more of an intersectional perspective, or really understanding the multiple layers and nuances that make those people really who they are. And that expands beyond their disability. I am not monolithic as just being a blind person, as an example. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a professional. And so there are many different considerations that make up both myself and others. So we look at these different points along this shape that identify characteristics of these people who may be blind, who may be deaf, but also they may be part of the queer community. They may be part of an aging community. They may have a particular religious consideration. And so all of these different points truly make up more of a holistic interpretation. And therein, yes, we need to make our communications accessible, but we can layer in other communications that does a much better job of welcoming not at only one point along a communications pathway, but much more immersively within an entire customer journey.
And so, absolutely, we are looking at inclusivity from a point of intersectionality. Someone's base identity, for example, might start with the disability community, but as Josh had said, there are so many other variables that come into play. So we're seeing these intersectionality as you see sort of all the points mentioned here: age, gender, location, education, race, social class. And so, for example, I know we've been having conversations with our WT Taiwan team, and one of the things that's come up is what disability may look like, for example, in a population like Taiwan would be, if we're looking at disabilities, it might actually start with age. We are in an aging society where in 4 years, I think it's 21% of the local population will be above 65. And what we know in that general population is that, things like eyesight, hearing, cognitive decline, health decline in general, and mobility may all be an issue. And those are some of the top four most sort of largest groups when we're looking at sort of visible disabilities. And so this might be something to explore where we can have high impact within the local communities and local population. And that could be in one person. My own grandmother, who's 95, cannot hear well, cannot see well, cannot move around well. It's definitely going through cognitive decline. And so, there is sort of when we're looking at high need populations, perhaps one to investigate. And so, and in Taiwan, we might want to think about, so we just mentioned age, we might want to think about gender. We might want to think about religious backgrounds, those who are not in the majority. So the majority might be more Buddhist. Maybe we want to look at the Muslim population. Maybe we want to look at the migrant population. There's, a lot that are underserved. And what we want to make sure is that whatever products and services you have, we're bringing equity into the conversation, and we're making sure that everybody have access so that we are sort of elevating society at its best for everyone. Josh, would you like to take this?
Yeah, the one thing to share with everyone, simply put, is if you're still on the fence of how does inclusion connect with my project, the process, and the team that I work with, or ultimately the client, inclusion equals growth. plain and simple. And so I think that's something that we want to hopefully be able to allow your teams, your talent to be able to internalize and to be able to bring to the projects that you work on with your clients. And here, when it comes to that growth, we do want to help to be able to put more of a framing and contextualization on the disability community that oftentimes, potentially, if in the past you may have thought of disability, and in certain instances today, disability may be seen as simply considerations where nonprofits or charities come into play. But if we look at disability from a population standpoint, again, as Cindy had shared earlier, it's 1 billion plus people. From a financial consideration, these individuals, along with their friends and family network, have literally trillions of dollars to be able to spend on consumables, products and services. Any brand that you work with, there's an opportunity to be able to have people who want to be loyal, who want to be able to be welcomed positively and equitably, and share their dollars or whatever financials that they have with the brands that we work with on a regular and daily basis. And ultimately as well, again, if brands do incorporate disability inclusion into their campaigns and creative, we are seeing positive changes and positive trends. So this is a wonderful opportunity to recognize that these numbers help anchor in a true value from a monetary perspective, from a loyalty perspective, and really, again, just from an altruistic consideration that collaborating and shaping communications to be able to bridge some of those gaps can be very positive from a bottom line and return on investment.
And we know, of course, that inclusion matters, and what's good for consumers is good for business, as Josh just reinforced here. And you'll see, I mentioned earlier, consumers really do prefer to buy brands that are inclusive, and they would pay a premium for more inclusive. They would actually pay more money if you were more inclusive, and they would actually stop buying and stop supporting a brand if they found out that it didn't represent them. So, I think sort of action speaks, and what's good for business. So 20% increase in sales if your advertising and your communication is more inclusive, seen as more innovative if you're more inclusive. So, and also marketers believe that most marketers, 91%, that's almost everyone, believes that there's room to do better. And so clearly that gives us a lot of momentum and a lot of ammunition in terms of thinking about moving forward, what that could look like as we move into, driving leadership in marketing and driving inclusivity into everything we do.
And here, just to share a little bit more about what accessibility can mean from a conversion and a metrics perspective here. Again, following along with captions, and captions may be considered subtitles as well, but captions are that lower third of language information that shares not only what's being said on screen, but also sharing the sounds and other audible elements that are part of a video to be able to better convey what's on screen to those who can't hear it in its entirety. But captions, what we're seeing, if they're used in a mobile experience, many people who are looking at their mobile devices have the volume turned down, or maybe in a place where they can't hear it as well, or just, again, have the captioning on. And what we're seeing is that there's a significant positive from a brand lift perspective and a retention of knowledge of that content that's being shared, much more so than if the captions are not there. So there are many positives to incorporating accessible components to advertising campaigns.
And I just want to chime in that nationally, I do feel like Taiwan is ahead when it comes to captioning. I remember growing up in Taiwan as a kid, and on TV, everything is captioned. So it seems like, not only is the audience very accustomed to captioning, but it really is everywhere. And so I think next time you're on the train, 捷运, on the MRT, just maybe take a survey around you, because it's so newly built. Some of the things that Josh is mentioning in terms of captioning and accessibility standards, you'll notice in sort of your 360 experience as a rider.
And here, just to dive into another accessibility point for communications, audio descriptions are relatively new when it comes to accessibility for people who are blind or have low vision. And audio descriptions are relatively straightforward. It's a voiceover on a video that goes beyond what's being shared by the on-screen talent to help describe what's being seen on screen if you can't see it as well. So for example, if I can't see what's on screen at all, or it's blurry to me, then audio descriptions help to share a little bit more about what's there for me to help contextualize what I'm seeing.
Oi! Gotcha!
Quick! The quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker and is 2 times more absorbent than the leading ordinary brand. Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
Oi!
A little girl runs around dressed as a pirate.
Gotcha!
She pokes Dad with her play sword, and surprised, he spills his coffee. Everything slows down as the coffee heads toward his other daughter's laptop.
Quick! The quicker picker-upper.
Bounty cleans spill.
Bounty picks up messes quicker and is 2 times more absorbent than the leading ordinary brand.
Bounty absorbs more coffee than other paper towel. Dad chases daughter.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
And here, just to keep the conversation going on accessibility and disability inclusion, what we're seeing is that there is a huge gap when it comes to website accessibility. And there are a variety of levels of accessibility when it comes to websites. But knowing that so many consumers really primarily use either their mobile devices, laptops, tablets, or other technologies to be able to engage with brands, digital accessibility is critical, and it's important from an information and an immersive perspective to be able to equitably connect with brands. But there's a massive chasm that needs to be bridged to ensure that what we're developing is accessible and inclusive. And really, we like to share that this is a journey, and it's a journey that can be hopeful, filled with love and belonging. But conversely, if we're not accessible, it can be hopeless, loveless, and a place where we don't belong. So we want to make sure that with our brands, with our creative, we can really go down that journey in a way that isn't just a one project that ends, where accessibility and inclusion doesn't continue, but one where we can be mindful of it throughout a campaign and across consumer touch points. And here, elevate, don't relegate, I should say. So when it comes to disability inclusion, we don't want to make it the ultimate everything of every single project that you have, or something that seems like it's overdone and inauthentic. But is there an opportunity, again, to look at that customer journey, to look at all of the major and minor touch points that consumers may have to ensure that we're not just looking at an accessible website and then ultimately recognize that our social media platforms and our engagements with consumers in those places that drive to an accessible website are inaccessible? That would definitely be a challenge for these individuals that we want to be able to welcome. So really look at all the different spaces and places where we want to delight, inform, and engage, and ensure that, at least from a minimum viability, we can be accessible and welcoming. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about inclusion in telecom. And I will say, just to preface this section, while we do have 2 examples, first with Verizon and then with Telefonica, inclusion and accessibility is a driving force with a number of different telecoms, examples including T-Mobile, AT&T, Vodafone, and others. But here are just 2 that we can walk through to showcase what, for example, Verizon is spearheading for disability inclusion and accessibility. So here, first to note, pardon me, that when it comes to accessibility, Verizon is definitively engaging with consumers and end users of their products their services and their devices in ways to be able to showcase and highlight what accessibility means and how to navigate that accessibility for those that are part of the Verizon family that may be new to it. And also as well, Verizon continues to update and enhance what those accessibility offerings are. They are very straightforward and pragmatic in their approach, but as well, also invoke emotional engagement and immersive ways to be able to showcase and highlight accessibility and their differentiation. But here, in this way, these are just examples from their website that convey a few of the ways that accessibility is important and how to be able to approach that as a consumer or end stakeholder. And as I shared, they can be emotional and showcase some of the challenges and barriers, but as well, some of the ways that Verizon is bridging those gaps. And this video that we'll share highlights a few examples from individuals with disabilities and how Verizon elevates, from a technology perspective, their lives.
Passions. Everyone should have a passion.
I love fashion. I like to dress nice.
I love sports. I love sewing.
What I'm passionate about is that everything should work for everybody.
I'm currently working as a mathematics teacher in a school for the blind.
I was a social worker years ago, and because of my hearing loss, I could not do my job anymore, and I loved my job.
I have cerebral palsy, and I use assistive touch, and I am access all the features.
The advancement of technology has really been helpful to me. Now I use my phone for going online almost exclusively.
305.
If there wasn't accessibility, I wouldn't be here. I'm using my phone to read what you're saying. I have an app.
In my hand, I can hold a device that keeps me connected to the world. Then the only question is, how do I access it? Everyone else is looking at their smart devices, and I have to listen to it.
Week 5,000 minimum. I need a consistent environment. I don't need something that's cute. I'm not here for cute. I'm here for efficiency. The machine is making things easier for me. If it makes things harder, it goes in the bay.
There should be something for someone like me where I could have an insight of what's trending and get to know what goes with my body type, what goes with my skin color.
Each of us have our own needs. We're all on a spectrum. And on that spectrum, all we need are the right tools to be able to gain access to what we need.
All of this technology has been absolutely life-changing for me and for people with hearing loss.
Accessibility, to me, is like the air. It has to be there all the time.
So after Verizon, you've seen a depth and breadth of what they offer. Let's just share a little bit more about another telecom, Telefonica. Telefonica is headquartered in Spain, and they have moved forward down the path of progress when it comes to disability inclusion in a number of different ways. Telefonica is a member of the Valuable 500. It's an organization based in the United Kingdom that has a global presence that is supportive of corporations and corporate initiatives and a guidepost for those corporations that want to champion and further foster disability inclusion. Along with that, here you see an image of disability in the workplace. So Telefonica definitely recognizes that there's an opportunity to not only support the key stakeholders externally, end consumers who use their products and devices, but as well internally to support those employees that have disabilities or their family members. So really they're creating a holistic and pervasive, systemic really approach to welcoming people with disabilities.
And so, having looked at some of the telecom examples that are, industry leaders, maybe in the US or maybe in Spanish-speaking countries, we know that, inclusive design is an emerging conversation in the Asia region and in particularly in countries like Taiwan. And we see an opportunity to position and drive impact partnering with you as a thought leader and as a national leader, 中华电信 for within your industry in impacting sort of the population and basically your consumers and your customers within your community to really lead inclusive design as one way, among many, to support and fuel your thought leadership, your business advantage, and really help you drive your leadership. And then lastly, because we never want to leave without actioning against inclusive design in some way, shape, or form together with you and our communities. In planning forward, we hope we get to co-design with you and just a little bit of a roadmap of what we could do together. We hope we have a chance to dive in. We'll leave you with this, but we hope we have a chance to dive into this with you of what that could look like. And what I want to mention is just when we talk about end-to-end inclusion, it's not that we bring, our audiences into the room and talk with them for 20 minutes and then put their picture in an ad and that's it. That's not what we're talking about. We want to co-design so that we're really integrating this into how we work through our marketing approach. And so in terms of every step of the way from insight to discovery, co-creation, co-development, and then when you're in the market, working with the communities to make sure that we are supporting and investing in making sure that this is something relevant and meaningful that the community can work with, and also something that can really help grow and scale so that it benefits everyone.
This has been an exciting opportunity. Hopefully we've shared some insights that give you a bit of pause and see opportunities where maybe there's some gaps that we can bridge and collaborate on some wonderful opportunities ahead.
And then first and foremost, you should contact Eric and Jill. But we are here too in collaboration, and we're excited to continue this conversation with you. We hope that this was a good use of your time in terms of learning more about our practice in inclusive design, and we look forward to connecting with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Interview take 1, marker.
Hi, I'm Daniel Durant, and that's my name sign. I'm deaf and I'm an actor. Acting has always been a dream of mine. And now, getting to act on stage, and then being in a feature film, and getting to be part of a dance competition on TV, my dream's coming true. I've had a long journey to get here. My first time acting was 9 years old, and I told my moms that I want to be involved in more plays, and they said fine. But understand, I'm from Duluth, Minnesota. It's a small town, and there was no opportunity for a long time. So I remember looking back when YouTube came up. I was like, YouTube, what is that? And then looking into it, I noticed that anyone could post any video. So I would make funny videos and see funny videos from other deaf people, and that gave me an idea. I like to tell stories and tell jokes in ASL. And then I made my own videos. I have some, let me show you. My channel on YouTube is still there. The deaf community is very small, so having a platform like YouTube, you just write in deaf, funny, and then a ton of videos would come up, and that's how we would find each other. All of the things we could show each other, I'm just very thankful for YouTube for that. Really, I'm proud that I'm still on TV and showing my face out there because I want to represent for the deaf community. Really, it's important because we need more authentic deaf actors, because authenticity is important, and there's millions of stories about us out there. Like myself, being involved with Deaf West Theater allowed me to meet tons of creative people, actors, writers, directors. We all got to sit around and share our dream with each other and grow and develop. So for the next generation of deaf children, I want to see them grow. Really, it's so nice having the technology on the Google phone, the live captions. I can call someone, and when they pick up and start speaking, there's captions for me. It's transcribed, so I can see what a hearing person's saying, and then I can type back. So that means I can order my own pizza, you can call and make a doctor's appointment, you can do it yourself. So I feel more independent, and it's amazing. Whatever makes you happy and what you enjoy doing, follow that. Chase that. The important thing is we connect. Communication does not have to be a barrier.